everybody, and welcome to another episode of My Ruby Story. This week we're talking to Taylor Jones. Taylor, do you want to say hi?
Hey there.
Now, you were on episode 425 of Ruby Rogues. We talked about Webpacker and Rails. Do you want to give us a little bit more of an introduction, who you are, what you do, things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you mentioned, my name is Taylor Jones. I currently work as a support engineer for Heroku or Salesforce, but Heroku is an entity that I work for. Right. Just basically helping out everybody from Rubyist to first-time JavaScript folks or any language that we support get their apps up and running on Heroku, but also how to better optimize them for the platform as well.
I gotcha. This episode is sponsored by Sentry.io. Recently, I came across a great tool for tracking and monitoring problems in my apps. Then I asked them if they wanted to sponsor the show and allow me to share my experience with you. Sentry provides a terrific interface for keeping track of what's going on with my app. It also tracks releases so I can tell if what I deployed makes things better or worse. They give full stack traces and as much information as possible about the situation when the error occurred to help you track down the errors. Plus, one thing I love, you can customize the context provided by Sentry. So, if you're looking for specific information about the request, you can provide it. It automatically scrubs passwords and secure information, and you can customize the scrubbing as well. Finally, it has a user feedback system built in that you can use to get information from your users. Oh, and I also love that they support open source to the point where they actually open sourced Sentry if you want to self-host it. Use the code DevChat at Sentry.io to get 2 months free on Sentry's small plan. That's code DevChat at Sentry.io. So do you mostly work with Ruby then, or JavaScript?
So if you or any of the viewers know anything about Heroku, it started off mainly as a Ruby on Rails platform. Mm-hmm. And so historically, like by default, we have a ton of Ruby apps. So a lot, like I would say probably 1 out of 3 tickets I deal with are Ruby based.
Okay.
But especially, and there's kind of the reason I talked about the Webpacker in the last episode is that we're starting to see a lot of Node apps on the platform as well. And
right.
So everything from, basically legacy Rails to whatever the new Node hotness is. We support Python, Java, Scala as well. That's always a good one. But yeah.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
So so this is more about your story, your journey into programming and into Ruby in particular. Though we may dive into some of these other stacks, depending on how much experience you have with them and see, kind of how you got there. Yeah, I remember early days Heroku. I think it initially started out as kind of an in-browser IDE. Mm-hmm. And then, it became more of the hosting, Git push platform that it is now. How did you wind up over there?
Man, I think it's kind of funny that I got on this because it's actually a really good story. So I guess years ago at this point, I went to Auburn University in Auburn, Alabama for computer science. Basically, as part of my education there, I snagged an internship with this company in Birmingham that actually wrote .NET software. And so I got exposed to that whole world of .NET and stuff like that. But I basically ran the QA department for this .NET company. And the product they built was for like desktop computers at the time. Right. And it was kind of right before the cusp of when we were really delivering everything through the internet and just having web-based apps and stuff. So I would have a lot of downtime at this place because oftentimes it was literally one of those places where you'd run a build and it'd be, okay, 45 minutes in this build until I'm just kind of sitting there like, well, I looked at the last build and I said yes or no to it, but what am I going to do now? And so started just kind of digging around for tech talks and stuff like that. And I think just through, I think Zed Shaw wrote how to program Ruby the hard way forever ago. And I picked that up and I'd kind of just been learning Ruby a little bit, but I was like, what's the deal with this? Like, can I I really like the language. Like, can I put it on the web or what's the kind of hot thing to do right now with Ruby? So I started learning Rails in my free time. And so it was pretty interesting because I was like, okay, like, a lot of the resources around that time were mentioning Heroku because Heroku still does to this day, but back then that was the biggest thing. They had the free tier. So basically, if you just have an app you want to deploy, you do get push Heroku master, and you're set. There's no really cost up front from that. It's not a trick. There's no like weird like, oh yeah, no, like it's like free for the first 30 days. No, like you could just put it up there and just leave it till the end of the time if you wanted to. So I got really interested in Heroku like years ago, and I'd used it as a Rubyist. And so anyways, kind of time went on. I did my internship, went back to college, worked for like a PHP web development company in Auburn where I went to college for a bit. I think I did a few Rails apps where I could there. They were kind of like, hey, deploy a site. And I said, well, I could either use WordPress, which is great to spin up something quick, or I could just do something quick with Rails and, kind of design the views myself. And so I started trying to do that, but it wasn't until I got out of college I landed my first like Ruby gig, or more like where I programmed Ruby day to day. So I worked at a small consultancy in Birmingham called Motion Mobs, and I did some stuff for them for a bit. We kind of built this. It was kind of like it was like headfirst into just like, okay, not only like professional Rails stuff, but like big time stuff. So we did this giant project where it was actually my first introduction to like Ember.js and Rails and API and doing stuff at scale and
the deep end.
Yeah, like for real. And
it's nice over here.
Well. Yeah, so it was just insane. Yeah. So it was just kind of like death by fire hose for a bit. So did that for a bit and then moved on to Orlando, Florida, where I am now.
Right.
And I worked for this place called Azia for a bit. And we basically did like social media influencer marketing platform stuff. That was the first company I worked for with the actual like product on the internet. That was the primary thing, right? So your experience with like not merely like continuous deployment, but like, hey, our moneymaker is this thing that has to be up all the time and has to be working all the time. Right. It has to be like killing it. Whereas the consultancy is like, hey, we could technically ship a bad product, right? And we would get our money, we would get a return business, but we kind of just ship it and leave it there. You don't care about what you did or what some person did 3 years ago, right? And so a lot of my work at Izea was like, all right, we have to kind of undo ourselves out of this corner we read ourselves into before you even showed up.
Right.
So did that. During that time, I started speaking at conferences a lot more. So I did RailsConf for 2 years. I did a stint at InverConf for a year. Basically started taking the stuff I was learning at Izea and beforehand out there and kind of showing that. So I talked a lot about actually microservices and monoliths, that whole like age-long debate, but more so the experience that I was seeing at Izea with that. Because we were in the middle of like, okay, we had this giant like Rails app from years ago and we want to do all this stuff, but if we're honest, we haven't been good at like stewarding that thing. And so maybe the solution instead of fixing it would be to like, just go and break it up into smaller things. So at least like if this service is super old, we can replace it. So kind of talked about our journey with that and the good parts and the bad parts. And that was really, I kind of wish I probably need to go do like another talk about it. But like, I think that for me, it was cool to kind of watch that like bigger software development thing going on. So the reason I mentioned the conference stuff is that I've actually met a few folks from Heroku around at conferences because they're really present, especially in the Ruby and Rails community.
Right.
But all like programming conferences at this point these days, like we have people everywhere sort of, and it's great. Met a few folks from there and just kind of kept in touch for a couple of years. And opportunity opened up last year to join their support team. And I was like, yes, please. So went through that, kind of passed the test there and have been there ever since and loved it. But it was kind of a weird full circle moment for me for being like, not to be like all nostalgic for myself, but like, oh, I remember being like a kid and being like, man, like I really would love to work for this organization and I really love this product. And a lot of the people at Heroku like came from that background too, where they're like, man, like I resonated with this for years. And so like joining this now is really cool. And so it's really cool to kind of see that, but it's also interesting to see something that was like groundbreaking years ago continue to try to find a way to keep pushing forward, right? Because if you're around long enough to like see the early days of Heroku, it was just like, it was literally like DevOps invented for some people. And so now we're kind of stewarding like okay, how do you like do things at scale like really well?
Right.
Beyond just getting started. Like, why is Heroku a good platform for you to host your giant company app on, as opposed to say deploying directly to AWS, Google Cloud, any other kind of thing that's out there right now?
Yeah, that's awesome. And I love, there are so many things I just love about that story where it's essentially, it was a place you thought you might want to work. You met people at the conference, and a lot of folks, they really get this idea that for whatever reason they can't, be it imposter syndrome or It's kind of this pie in the sky thing that they're never going to have. And it turns out that if you go put yourself in the right situation, you can have it.
Oh yeah. Like it's really like a classic kind of thing of learning to like, I think the theme I was thinking about earlier was that, so I think it's a theme of going places, right? And treating people well, not with the agenda, right? Because you can go to these conferences and meet people who are like, I really want to work at this place. And so I'm going to kind of try to like, kind of squeeze my way into that. And I think that like, there's certainly a effectiveness to that. But I think that what I loved about the friendships that I made at Heroku before I worked there, they weren't like best friends, but they were just people that like I really liked a lot, and they really liked me, I guess. And so like it was cool to kind of just keep up with them over the years with no agenda. And then when that time that like our interests aligned, it was like, oh, like cool, like let's partner together, let's do something cool. And so it was kind of one of the coolest. I've seen that kind of return in my career a few times before with like dividends like that, but this is the biggest one in the sense of like, oh, this is like actually where I really want to go, not just like, hey, a buddy of mine forward me a freelance project from somebody or something. Those are cool too, but Heroku was probably the biggest.
I worked a few of those contract that somebody sent my way because they didn't have time for it. But yeah. So one of the things that I like to just get from people is, how did you get into programming in the first place?
So I always like had trouble answering this when I was younger, because it felt like I said a bunch of things about like different things I was interested in. I would say the biggest thing though, and it sounds so corny, but I hear this from a lot of people, is video games. I really, really, really loved playing video games growing up as a kid. And I think that for me, it was really cool to see like, okay, how's this made? I had that curiosity of like, I like this thing. I like computers, like video games, like whatever. Like, how do I make that? I think when I was younger, I was like, I want to make video games. And then when I got older, I kind of looked at the margins that people get paid for and the hours you do. And I'm like, I don't know about that. But for me, it was like, I took that with college to me. So I was like, all right, like when you're 18 or 19 to go to college, it's almost like the people that you feel like you walk in and somebody's like, choose what you're going to do for the rest of your life now. And you're like,
yeah, I know.
Like it's so hard to feel that way. And so I think that for me, computer science is the thing I chose. And I think there was an element of stubbornness to my life because computer science, at least when I went to school and from the last time I chatted to people, it's a lot of math. And like I was like okay-ish at math, but it wasn't like like math is my passion and my forte and what I love to do. And so I think that for me, it was cool to see like, me kind of push through something I wasn't as like stoked on, to get through that thing, because ultimately the couple of programming classes I had were until maybe about a year into college, compiled on top of all your basics. So the thing I was first introduced to was Java, actually, and so which is a bit of a confusing place for me to enter as like a Ruby, like getting into Ruby, because like at the time it was just kind of like everybody's like, oh, well, you should use Rails because Java is like not good. And
I remember those.
Yeah, like you know what I mean? Like that was like Java was the big bad person at the time.
Yeah, we're not Java. Come to us.
Right. Or it's like we're not .NET or whatever. Because honestly, in 2010 when I went to college, like it's weird to think, but like a lot of companies were still kind of holding on to like big Java, like desktop apps were still making money for the most part. And the internet was something that people were like looking to get on, but I don't think anybody had made a gold mine's worth of money off yet. And so a lot of companies are like, well, yeah, like we have this enterprise legacy Java app or this C# app or VB script app or whatever that we're doing. And we want
enterprise legacy app. That just sounds like no fun.
Yeah. It's just like, it costs like $12,000 to like even like get the license to code in that sort of business.
Right. Yeah.
So it's like interesting, like not to degrade on Microsoft, but like it's interesting how the company went from like basically pay us money so you can code to like we're going to give you awesome free tools and then you're going to do it. So that's kind of how like Ruby came into perspective for me. It was like, okay, not only is this like effective, cost effective, like there's no barrier to entry on this. It's actually a bit more fun to do, and a bit more pleasing and easy to learn, as opposed to you go into these like these companies that I work for. It's like, man, like you're working on like one component and you have no idea. Like it's just so massive and so hard to understand. And so, that's kind of the thing for me. So I learned Java and learned that kind of point of view, which was really good. I think still to this day, because I think that sometimes the things that Rubyists, if you start out in Ruby and you stay with Ruby, you never had like the gory experience of like understanding kind of how stuff from the lower level works, or maybe how, or maybe even appreciating what other things do.
Right.
So I think the closest thing that honestly has come, and I think it's nice, is like Go reminds you a little bit of Java in the sense that like it's compiled a little bit lower level, but like it's nice because like you have to, understand the trade-offs between like kind of maybe a language like Ruby that's more dynamic and maybe it's more compiled and more lower level. And so for me, I think I kind of explained a little bit earlier in my story, whereas like for me, it wasn't that I hated those things. Right. I was fully willing to spend the rest of my life coding those things if it meant that, that was what I was doing. But I think I just found like if people always talk about like a little bit of joy or a little bit of happiness or a little bit just like pleasure with like actually programming. It doesn't feel like I'm kind of fighting a system as much as I'm just kind of doing and designing and implementing what I want. So that stuck out to me like really huge in the early years.
A few years ago at a JavaScript conference, I was approached by Nader Dabit. And you might know him for the React Native Radio podcast. He's also a developer evangelist for Amazon. And when he came to me, we had a conversation about React Native. And the thing that I love about React Native is that it's approachable, it's web technology, and it's cross-platform. And it makes a lot of things really easy for developers to jump in and do interesting things on mobile with JavaScript. So we've had this show now running for several years, React Native Radio, where we interview people about the React Native ecosystem, some of the things that are coming out in React and how they affect mobile, and other options that you have for mobile development. So if you're doing mobile development, you're doing it in JavaScript, you're looking for a good option, or maybe you're just trying to stay current with React Native, then go check out React Native Radio at reactnativeradio.com. Yeah, when I got into school, it was the same thing. They were teaching us Java. Took a couple classes in C and C++, but I was a computer engineering major, so they were pushing us more toward the lower level stuff like C. But yeah, it was the same deal, intro to programming was Java. So yeah, I definitely hear that. How did you wind up getting exposed to Ruby then?
I have a hard time like remembering what the exact moment is. But I think for me, it was this point, like Zed Shaw's thing was a big deal. Like the book that you wrote, Learn Ruby the Hard Way. But I can't remember how I got into that. I think it was just a combination of people on Twitter mentioning it a lot. I think around the time I got into Twitter, like DHH was starting to get on there and start kind of causing a ruckus. And so naturally when you hear about that, like I think Aaron Patterson just kind of started getting like pretty popular too. And so a lot of the early programming people I followed on Twitter too happen to be Rubyist. One, I kind of like the style of those people just because they see like more themselves, not the diss in the community. But I think it's just like I really there was something cool about like, okay, these guys and girls are like talking about like really they're talking about a bit newer stuff, a bit different stuff, but they seem like they're having a lot of fun. And so I kind of want to see what it's about. So I would say a lot of the people like Aaron and DHH and any else, that's off the top of my head, like I think that they were just people I followed on Twitter early on. So I was like, oh, these guys and girls seem like they're having a ton of fun and having like doing some different stuff. And even if that stuff is kind of lame to me or not like as cool to me, like I at least want to check it out and see what it's about. And that kind of got me interested in Ruby. And I haven't really looked back in a lot of ways since. I think I've just really always loved the community. And just the more people I met from it, the more people were like, yeah, I think we kind of like connect on a similar level in a weird way. Not that any other programming language doesn't make me feel like that, but I think it was just like I really enjoyed being around people who code Ruby because I feel like that we kind of value the similar things. Because when you code Ruby, you have to kind of be bought in a little bit to what it's about.
Yep, I agree. So what are you working on now?
So Heroku is interesting in the sense that the product's already built, right?
Right.
We're, in a lot of ways, part of us is maintaining a product that already exists. We're working on some cool stuff that will hopefully come to light a day soon. But for the most part, for me as a support person, like I quite literally am supporting that entity. So I don't really do a lot of maintenance on the apps themselves. But for us, it's like really a lot of my work these days is actually learning. It feels like, and that's the thing I always loved and respected about my friends who worked at Heroku is I always felt they were learning. And it's really the truth for me where it's like a lot of my day is certainly answering people's tickets and, helping dive into these issues that are like beyond, like you do have people that come up and say like, hey, like I'm having trouble, getting a Ruby app going. And like it's totally awesome. Like I'm totally glad to help those people. And it's super cool to watch people kind of have their first experience like programming and like watching that like become something on the internet.
Yep.
Like that's really cool. But also the other half of it is like, hey, we're a giant enterprise company that Heroku's on, and like this thing broke, and some people are like, we want answers, but some people are like, can you help us like figure out what's up?
Right.
And a lot of that's kind of investigating and stuff like that. So it's either helping advise people how to kind of get started, or it's like doing some hardcore performance analysis on apps and kind of DevOps spelunking from a certain point. Outside of that, it's really like trying to either learn my own stuff or trying to better familiarize myself with what we're doing to kind of help contribute. We have actually a lot of, and I really hope that our support engineers get to talk about this more, but it's like a lot of really impressive support infrastructure that we've rolled ourselves. We certainly like third-party services to help make things happen, but for the most part, when you file a support ticket at Heroku, it's actually through software that we wrote and maintained. Which is super rad. And I really hope that we continue down that path. But we've actually created a system that's super incredible. So a lot of stuff's actually like helping developing tooling around supporting that, like supporting support in a weird way. And the other half of it is just trying to figure out kind of like how we can best be useful to the organization. There's a lot of, when I joined a year ago, things are completely different as far as what's ahead than there is now. And we have some exciting stuff, but kind of the shifting of resources and all that stuff to whatever we're doing next, like kind of leaves out like things that need to be owned and helped out with. And so there's also an element of it that like we help out with, like helping our friends in open source. And so, because one of the biggest, actually, I think products that Heroku does, and we usually have people that own this like physically for their job, but is like build packs. So contribute to that. But there's some things that have fallen behind the wayside. Like for example, we have some people helping out with this, but like for example, our Ember.js build packs a little bit kind of just community maintained. And so would love to like a lot of times support people who help out, like maintain stuff. I've been doing some work on Webpacker recently to kind of help with their documentation, but a lot of it too is just understanding like it's worth my time and my effort to understand how projects like that are going to and making them better. Because not only do we have documentation issues, like for something like Webpacker when somebody opens a ticket, but I would actually say, and this is definitely the case of Rails 6, is that Webpacker is kind of a really, really important cog in what's going on with Rails apps now. And a lot of issues that we have come up are like, hey, like I'm having this Webpacker thing kind of go wrong. How do I debug it? Because it's so new for so many Rubyists, and that's not a drag on their skill. It's the fact that they have a new technology that they're having to like really learn how to debug and grapple with. So for me, like it's a lot of my work is understanding, contributing to those things, but also trying to keep up with whatever people are doing on the platform these days.
Yep. So I love it. I love the contribution to open source and some of the ideas around what you're doing there. And I love that Heroku likes to support that stuff because it's important, and a lot of times it just gets missed. So that's really cool. So do you see yourself moving up to, I guess, like full-time developer, or do you love doing the support, or like I'm curious where you see yourself going from here.
Sure. It's a big like conversation I've had with myself this year and others at the company. I think I love the support aspect because I think it's like the best part of being able to not only teach people, but like learn in a weird way. Like I think about sometimes it feels like, you're just like answering tickets. You're just doing the next thing to the next thing. Right. But really having this experience of like understanding how people are doing things at a high scale. Heroku itself is awesome because it's like an open book of how to use something at a high scale. Like, we are an app helping deploy apps. But I think for me, it's hard because it's like this kind of, it doesn't feel like Hogwarts or something like that, but it sort of does, right? Where what like house you want to be in, because we have like so many different specializations. And so it sounds kind of trippy, but the past year has really just been trying to get heads or tails and like what the heck is going on and what do we do and how does all this work?
Right.
Because I came in with my like knowledge of like how to debug Ruby apps and how to do performance analysis and all this sort of stuff. But how do I like I've gotten to the point now where I can read a ticket and I can be like, oh, if something's wrong on our ends, it's here or it's there. But even like learning from the people that do that. So it's kind of like, it's this weird thing where you kind of, so the answer is I could do support for probably like my rest of my time there. Like it'll be a blast. It doesn't feel at all like I'm like, oh, like maybe one day, like it really feels like this kind of really sweet deal where I get to like develop on my own terms and help make things better and also just learn and be a part of this awesome organization. But there's also an element of too that's kind of asking myself like I do miss full-time, full-blown development in a lot of senses too, right? Because it's fun owning a product and working with it and developing it and making it better and having that experience of like, dealing with the highs and lows of that. So I think that's I'm kind of caught in between that a little bit, is asking like, man, what's next? But I think for the time being, it's at least for looking forward for me, it's kind of keeping doing the same thing I do and probably just starting to share more and more about the things I'm learning through that. Because it didn't feel like a career reset, but it felt like a reset of what I do every day. When I was giving talks about a year and a half ago, I was talking about like developing a product every day. But now I'm talking about seeing snapshots of really sophisticated and wonderful products every day, and somehow jumping in and contributing something meaningful to that, while also understanding what in the world are we doing. Like, I thought that deploying to AWS is hard by yourself. Imagine writing a system to actually do that automatically. Like, fun, right? So that's hard. But that's kind of where it is at for me.
Nice. Yeah, I got into things in support when I was working in support. I mean, I'd been programming before that. I was finishing up my degree in computer engineering. But yeah, I felt like while I was there, I was making a difference. I was helping people. I was taking care of problems, and it was super positive. And so, yeah, it's always interesting to me to just see where people end up with, where they are and where they think they want to be. So.
Yeah. And I think the thing I'll add to that is that like, I think we've found that there's a lot of people that actually, it's not that their programming chops aren't there, right? But it's almost like that their skill set and what they're so awesome at is like stuff like documentation and explaining and teaching and stuff like that. And it's like, man, like you would be a killer developer, but you'd also be an excellent support agent, and you'd be able to do that development stuff in your own terms, in your own way, right? But you'd be able to like really teach people. We've made a lot of great hires recently from people that like lead everything from Black Girls Code to just local chapters and helping out like whatever's going on in their community, and like helping people like learn how to code for the first time, or helping people how to like sharpen their career skills, like whatever. Because of that, we've been making a lot of strong hires from people that are really good at teaching and communicating, and that's been really, really cool to see, because like, one, it helps our team be more well-rounded from a perspective of like, what's your background? What are you good at? But two, it also helps like our team get better, not only because we know those people can contribute killer features and program the way they want to and be able to make good contributions to our code, but also that they can really provide an awesome contribution to our learning infrastructure. A big part of Heroku is Dev Center, which requires its own programming, but at the same time, it requires a lot of maintenance of articles and documentation. And so like part of what we do is like, if we see that we have people kind of running into the same issue over and over again, or getting tripped up over a paragraph, or there's something our engineers didn't communicate in, the process of shipping this really complex feature, then we add it to Dev Center and help make that better, so that like, it helps create less tickets on our side, but it also provides a better Heroku experience. Like there's nothing like more satisfying, in my opinion, to be able to like kind of have a quick search and figure out your answer, as opposed to diving through documentation, or like if you've ever searched through maybe a not well maintained open source project or something like that, where you're like, how do I do this thing? I just want to know how to do the thing. And you're like, your 5 pages or whatever.
No, that makes sense. One of the biggest pain points that I find as I talk to people about software is deployment. It's really interesting to have the conversations with people where it's, I don't want to deal with Docker. I don't want to deal with Kubernetes. I don't want to deal with setting up servers. I don't, all of these different things. And in a lot of ways, DevOps has gotten a lot easier And in a lot of ways, DevOps has also kind of embraced a certain amount of culture around applications, the way we build them, the way we deploy them. And I've really felt for a long time that developers need to have the conversations with DevOps or adopt some form of DevOps so that they can take control of what they're doing and really understand when things go to production, what's going on, so that they can help debug the issues and fix the issues and find the issues when they go wrong and help streamline things and make things better and slicker and easier so that they'll more generally go right. So we started a podcast called Adventures in DevOps. And I pulled in one of the hosts from one of my favorite DevOps shows, Nell Shamrell Harrington from the Food Fight Show. And we got things rolling there. And so this is more or less a continuation of the Food Fight Show, where we're talking about the things that go into DevOps. So if you're struggling with any of these operational type things, then definitely check out Adventures in DevOps. And you can find it at adventuresindevopspodcast.com. Very cool. Well, I guess the other thing that I want to just cover for a minute is that a lot of times we talk about, okay, this was your career arc. This is, what you've done with Ruby. And we don't really get to see the person behind the code, if that makes sense. Yeah. So, I see some guitars behind you.
Yeah.
A lot of times it's just interesting. We hear from people, oh, well, their family situation is interesting. They've got a bunch of kids or, a life partner or somebody like that means something to them. Yeah, they have hobbies like the guitars or, something like that. So who are you? Like if I met you on the street and you didn't know that I was a Ruby dude and we could talk about that. What else would we wind up talking about?
We'd probably end up talking about music probably, because for me, like I'm a big, guitarist in the area. I, play with a few folks around town. That's actually a big part of what I like about Orlando. It's kind of weird. I grew up in the Deep South, which has a lot of great musicians, but Orlando, I guess because of the theme parks or something, like they have great, there's so many stupid talented people here. So I do that a lot. I have a son and a wife and just kind of love hanging out with them. We live in Orlando. So yes, we go to Disney World, as cliche as that is. We're not there like all the time, but we like doing that. I really like how cities are designed. That's a big thing that I'm into. I think that I have some friends that actually do urban planning for a living. Not that that's maybe in a weird life, I could probably do that, but I'm really interested in kind of how stuff's made, how it's designed. Right. And so that's why I feel like that I like programming, but it's programming feels very much like an extension of that curiosity, and it happens to be quite profitable, which is great for me. So the joke I actually made with a coworker the other day is he was saying I do music for fun and I do programming for the bills and some more fun too, right? And it's right, kind of true, but for me it's music, it's design, it's kind of, I've been trying to get back into the discipline of actually reading and not only being well informed. I had this bad habit of I was so well informed on like events going on around the world and news and all this stuff, but then I realized I have zero creativity. So I've been trying to challenge myself to read actually fiction this year. Oh wow! Not just biography about some guy or girl, as interesting that is, or some sort of social issues book. But I read a ton of those in 2018. So I've been trying to do fiction this year to enjoy myself a little bit. But other than that, I just became a dad a year ago. So a lot of the past year has been how do I just parent and then fill in time, all the rest. So it's felt like it's work parenting. And then the thing that's eaten up the most time is music. But that's been really good because it doesn't help me take my mind off those things, but it helps me kind of reset my mind and my body a little bit and just be all right, let's go for another round of parenting here, and knock it out. So
yeah, well, parenting gets more interesting as you move on. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, that's the thing, man. That's been really funny about Heroku too. And it's actually what sold me about it, not to get back to that, is that everybody there is a family man or woman. And so they really it's a really great place to raise a family, but it's also a really great place to just be I'm also man, if I was single and I'm just figuring out life, man, this would be a great place to work too. But it was really encouraging because you hear all these stories about people who are my daughter just graduated college, and you're wow, I have so many questions, right? Because you're way down the field from me, but I have a lot of people who are kind of the same classes me of like, hey, we're either starting our family or we're learning to raise toddlers at this point. And so all the insanity comes with that. And yeah, the advice it has, like, it doesn't get easier, but it changes in good and bad ways.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. It's more fun in some ways and less fun in other ways. So
yeah, so like my son's like really mobile now, and so like it's exhausting. It's exhausting.
Oh yeah. Yep. Yeah. The flip side of that is, so my sister, she has a baby. He's almost 1. And so he's just, he just rolls around on the floor.
Yeah.
But, so that's a little bit of a pain in the sense that, oh crap, we got to move everything out of his reach. But the flip side is she doesn't have to hold him all the freaking time.
Yeah. And you have to chase him around the house. Like that's the thing. It's like that was what blew my mind, is like, I was like, okay, you're walking down, so you're just going to be like slow. And then there's just like a week where we went from like, okay, just walking to like, you're practically running to a toddler's extent across this house. And I'm just trying to sit down and like drink my dang coffee.
Yeah. Wait till they're 13.
Exactly.
Anyway, if people want to follow you online, where do they go? Where do they find you?
I've scaled up my online presence a lot lately, but I'm actually trying to get back in the game of that. So I'm on Twitter under Hi, I'm Taylor Jones. So HIIM Taylor Jones. And that is also the address of my personal website, hiimtaylorjones.com. Got the branding down. Love it. But so for me, those are the 2 biggest places that I'm trying to put stuff up there now. I'm working on some changes to stuff, so I may change up all that. But for now, probably the most reliable place is Twitter. If you like, follow me on GitHub. I am on GitHub. Probably won't see a lot of my contributions because they're private or they're just like random public projects to do. But always great to keep up people in there. And I'm hoping to be out at some conferences next year, maybe. We'll see. Kind of cooking on some stuff there. But for the most part, probably Twitter is the best place to keep an eye out.
Good deal. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, the last part of the show is picks. We do these just like we do on Ruby Rogues. Do you have some things you want to shout out about?
Man.
Yeah, give us a good book. That's always good.
Yeah, I'm trying to find one.
Well, while you're looking that up, I can go with a couple of picks. So,
what you got?
Last week I went to JamstackConf.
Mm-hmm.
That's it was out in San Francisco.
Yeah.
And I really had a good time. It was a terrific conference. For those that aren't aware, JamstackConf is the Jamstack is JavaScript APIs and markup or Markdown. Markup?
Yeah.
Markup, not Markdown. I guess you can use Markdown to get markup. Anyway.
Sure.
So anyway, it's basically, static sites and things like that where, you put JavaScript on top of it. So they had folks there talking about stuff like Gatsby and Jekyll and all kinds of stuff. And it was really great. And I see a movement there. I don't know if it's going to like take over the world per se, but it's definitely, I think, going to grow and find a niche out there for people. So I enjoyed that. Yeah, I also just ran across a bunch of great companies there that were sponsoring. I'm just going to encourage people to go check out their sponsors, though, rather than call them all out. And then the other pick that I have is I've been listening to this podcast by, I think his name's Tom Bilyeu, and it's called Impact. What is this? Impact. Everything is impact, but it's Impact Theory. That's what it's called. Yeah, Tom Bilyeu. And he interviews people and talks to people about success and, grit, mental fortitude, entrepreneurship, a lot of great stuff. So I'm really enjoying that as well. So I'm going to pick that as my picks. Cool.
I got something. So the book I was trying to think about, I read that I really loved, Super Pumped by Mike Isaac. Really, really good book. Like devoured it in like 3 days. It's about Uber.
Nice.
If you subscribe to the New York Times, you probably heard some of the reporting from Mike about it. But it's a really, really well written and like interesting detail of just kind of not only startups, right? I thought it was just gonna be like a historical thing, but actually ended up being one of the better design/ethics books. It's kind of like the idea of like how certain things come to fruition or don't come to fruition. It's obviously not the complete truth on what maybe happened at Uber, but it was a really interesting perspective that I really, really liked a lot. Podcast. I'm trying to think. I'm really into like the You Need a Budget podcast lately. I don't know why. I've used that product for a couple of years. It's really, really cool if you don't.
Oh, do they have a podcast now?
Yeah, they have a podcast. It's like 4 or 5 minutes. It's super interesting. A lot of resources around that I've kind of enjoyed because it's helped kind of explain some of the design decisions. Again, like I'm super interested in like the design behind things. And I think that if people who use it or don't use it or never heard of it, it's interesting budgeting software that's really a bit more opinionated about kind of how it goes about things, but it works really, really well for a lot of people. I have a couple of friends that have like gotten themselves from like a really bad place financially to like a really rocking place financially because of it. And so that stuck out to me. But I've just really loved hearing from that team about kind of how they think about things.
Yep. Yeah, I just find it interesting for a couple of reasons. One is they're a local company. Two is their CEO. I met him at a conference and I told him he needed to start a podcast and he blew me off. So I was right.
I love that. Yeah, you could just email him now and be like, hey man, not that you're on this.
His name's Jesse or something. I don't remember exactly, but yeah.
Yeah, so hey Jesse, if you're listening to this, Charles.
Yeah. Anyway, I thought it was funny. But that was like 5 or 6 years ago. So.
Yeah, I mean,
like
everybody has a podcast now, right? Like you've been doing podcasts for a second, but like now everybody, like I wouldn't be surprised, like if Publix down the road, I would not be surprised if they started a podcast.
Oh yeah, that's where I see things right now. We're still kind of in the middle of hobbyists. A lot of the media companies are getting into it, but yeah, I think within the next 5 years, a lot of the companies who want to build a brand are going to wind up starting a podcast.
1,000%.
Because it's a terrific way to connect with people and let them know who you are and why they care who you are. So yeah.
Right.
And we do podcast production. I'll just throw that out there if people are thinking about starting a podcast. So
I love it.
All right, good deal. Well, thank you for hopping on and talking to me, Taylor.
Of course. Great always talking to you.
All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and wrap us up and everybody max out. Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with